The webinar is now broadcasting and recording. Will, good to see you. How are you, my friend?
Happy Wednesday, Josh.
Yes, happy Wednesday. Welcome, those of you tuning in, ready, top of the hour, jumping in quickly. Emily and Caitlin and Betsy and Kevin, Lee,
Kevin.
Lisa. So many of you, welcome, glad you're here. Happy hump day, as they say, right? Wednesday, midweek. I got to be honest with you, Will. I just drove in this morning from, I've been away from electronics, man. I'm like, I feel a little detached, a little out of the loop, but it's good for the soul. I was out just enjoying some beautiful lakefront property and at Center Hill Lake, just a couple hours outside of Nashville, and so I've been there for a few days and loving it. So you're catching me in probably a rarefied space here.
I love it. After a good 4th of July holiday, refreshed and thinking anew, right?
Thinking anew and new thoughts and new ideas and kind of getting ready for what looks to be the next half of the year, and what are we going to be doing, and how do we need to reframe what we're thinking?
Well, it's certainly been an extraordinary first half of the year, and I think as we start looking at the second half of 2020, and even more looking towards 2021, and what is going to be the plan and the opportunity for travel. There's, like, as you mentioned, I mean, I can just see it in your face, how kind of the relaxed and almost kind of like, God, I don't want to be back doing this. I'd rather be on the lake. And that's what travel does to you, right? So, I mean, if nothing else, what your experience shows just how dang important travel and tourism is to not only the economy, but to our hearts and souls and our families and, the experiences that we create.
And just general well-being, right? I mean, just absolute general well-being, mental health, physical health, emotional, spiritual health, everything. So yeah, absolutely. And we wouldn't have a successful webinar if Alfredo wasn't on the line tuning in. So, I'm sitting there I'm looking at those of you tuning in, and I'm so glad to see your names. Many of you that I do recognize, but many I don't. And if, frankly, if we've not had the opportunity to connect yet, whether that's through LinkedIn or email or anything, certainly would treasure that opportunity. Feel free to reach out anytime, connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email, jcollins@streetsense.com. I'd be happy to just connect and see how you're doing, and any way that I can serve and be of a useful help to you, I'd certainly long to be. So glad you're joining us today. And we've shifted things a little bit as we move forward in the second half of the year, right, Will?
Yeah, so I think Josh and I spent a lot of time talking through this last 3 months of the webinars, and it's just been so extraordinary. I mean, we've had over 2,000 different people log in to join us, Josh, and I think a lot of that is a testament to the incredible moderating that you've done over the course of this last 3 months. I think people are starting to come back to the office, getting a little busy. We did a survey and just decided, is this something that is continuing to provide value for the industry, or are people zoomed out? And clearly got overwhelming response that really like staying connected and starting some conversations. So I think that a couple of things that we're going to try to do moving forward is, and I know your team had the same kind of conversations. What's the next evolution of this over the course of the summer? And so I think you're going to go a little Joe Rogan on us and start doing a little deeper one-on-one dives, which I think is a really cool idea.
Yeah.
And there's so many people in our industry that we can learn so much from. So I think we'll do that. Definitely going to spread it out a little bit, I think, and we've agreed we'll start doing this every other week, kind of giving it a space. And then we're going to lead into October, which is going to be the eTourism Summit, the 21st year of the eTourism Summit, and that's going to have a different format. It's going to be a hybrid event with 21 days focusing on how to win in 2021. And it will also include 2 days live in Las Vegas in the middle of October. We'll have some pre-scheduled one-on-one appointments at the end of October to meet with suppliers and the vendors, and really excited about the agenda and the programming that we're putting together for eTourism Summit 2021 or 2020. And I think my theme there, and maybe this is kind of kicks off our conversation today, is kind of, let's put 2020 in hindsight and let's focus on winning in 2021, because there's going to be 2020 is a crapshoot.
Oh man,
for the next 6 months, and I think we're all going to keep our head above water.
It's so crazy to think. I was driving up, of course. Took off on Sunday morning, and was driving to the lake house, and I was sitting there thinking, I don't know that anyone had any remote idea that 2020 would look the way that it's looked, and that's just, thinking like transactionally, going, okay, what's the forecast going to be? What are we experiencing? We're coming off a great year, 2019. I think, for just about everybody that we've talked to, or we've been interviewing, or having these conversations with, have said, 2019 was a great year, right? Record numbers, extremely positive, great gain in lots of things, whether that's quality of life and the destination, visitor spending, et cetera. So certainly entering, 2020 with a ton of hope, and even beginning, to see first few months of the year were strong months, the first couple months, and then all of a sudden the bottom just falls out, and we're still trying to figure out what are we doing. There's still so much unknown. There's still so many pieces that we're like almost a little gun shy, because it's like you see it too. We're seeing destinations attempt to re-engage the market, and then unfortunately something happens inside the destination and they get called out for, what are you talking about? What are you advertising now for? Right? I mean, we're seeing that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. So saw that this week several times.
Yeah. So it's still pretty tricky. It's still, definitely something that is making it hard for us to serve our destinations well. And so I think, like you mentioned, we're moving to an every other week format. We're going to continue to stay connected. And certainly those of you that are on now, if you've got, you got topic ideas. So you've got, oh man, I'd love to hear this guest interviewed, or whatever it is, let us know. Certainly put those in the chats today. Feel free to, today we're going, you're going to kind of walk through some things here together, just Will and I, but certainly as things come up, questions you want to ask, we'll get to those. If we do our best, certainly mention any of that in the chat as well. And again, thank you for tuning in. And I just want to say this too, Will. The last, 6-7 years of eTourism Summit, at least for me personally, have been really incredible. They've been that community that comes together every year in October, right? Primarily, we were in, San Francisco every year, really, really good stuff. Of course, this year, as you just mentioned, 2 days in Las Vegas, and then of course, a lot of virtual components. If you guys that are tuning in have never participated in eTourism before, you've never sent any of your team members or anything like that, I just got to encourage you. It's a really helpful community of people, and great opportunity for networking, obviously, but great opportunity to learn, hear from your peers, people who are testing this, trying this, learning this. I'll tell you this, Will, somebody sent me an email this last week saying one of the things they would love to actually hear more about is, and we talked about this, why I'm bringing this up, because we talked about it before, but is failure. Who has, tested things and perhaps it didn't go as well as they thought, right? And that's such an interest. We've talked about that. How can we maybe incorporate that? Because we are pretty conditioned to trying to shine the spotlight on the best and the brightest, and and calling us forward. But there's a ton that we can learn from the mistakes and missteps and things like that.
And there's something to be said about the travel industry. I think is a great reflection of that. But we've got an industry that's willing to share the good and the bad and successes. And while maybe I can't imagine many other industries where you can have competing destinations sitting down in the same, in the same room, having a conversation about what worked best for them and what partners have been, so helpful for their industry. And that's one of the special things about eTourism Summit. And I think the community that's built up around it, and the reason why it's so refreshing. I mean, there's generations of tourism marketers that have kind of risen through eTourism Summit, and now we're seeing them continue to share with us on these webinars over the course of the last several months, and become the true leaders in the industry.
Absolutely, I could not agree more. So, as we as we kind of move forward in thinking about certainly topic today, thinking winners and losers, what are we positioning ourselves in, and how are we treating our organizations? What kind of work are we doing now to prepare? I know, Will, you've got so much to offer, obviously, having led, Florida so successfully for so many years. So if put yourself in that seat once again. Obviously, you're in a different role. You serve our industry differently now. But if you're in a CMO role, or you're in the executive chair role, albeit much like the chair you're in now, that looks so comfortable. What are you teaching your staff? How are you encouraging your staff, your teams? What policy initiatives are you thinking about on the ground? Just invite us in a little bit there.
Well, here's a thought that I have, Josh, and I bet everybody on the call and pretty much any destination in the country last year had a press release at some point that said that they had record visitation, right? I mean, we had an incredible 10-year run of record visitation to pretty much every destination around the country. As a result, all of our businesses are optimized to that kind of high growth environment. By the very nature, if everybody is going up and everybody is having record visitation, half of those destinations, while their visitor volume was increasing, were actually losing market share. There's a finite market share, and the question is, are you growing just rising, along with the rising tide? Are you actually growing market share? And I had a very vivid experience with this in Florida. Over the course of time, we were, our team at Visit Florida, and the team today still is growing, focused on increasing market share and increasing yield, were the key drivers, the key KPIs, right? That's what we were trying to accomplish. And we grew our market share in Florida for 10 years straight, every month, with the exception of 6 months. And those 6 months were the 6 months right after the oil spill, the BP oil spill. And the real irony of that was that in the 6 months after the oil spill, our visitor volume actually grew. So it made it very, very difficult to convince BP to write a check to help us, rebuild the Gulf tourism, because they said, you still have increase in visitation. Yeah. And I said, no, but our market share declined for the first time in 6 months. So we're now, every destination in the country is starting at zero. Our funnels are empty. So how do we make sure that, and the rising tide is no longer there. Right. So it's not going to be an environment of record-setting visitation anymore, but it gives us gives every destination, every tourism business an opportunity to set their new goals. What is it success look like for our community? And then I understand how best to get there. We haven't really had any conversations over this series really about what is your target audience in the new, in 2021. And I think the decisions that are going to be made now for that 2021 target audiences are going to have really long-term implications, thus a winner and a loser. Market share growth or market share decline.
Yeah, I think you're right, Lee. I love this, your comment, disruption equals reinvention. I heard this and thought it was awesome. One of the people out, in the world that I really allow access to influence me, influence my thinking, influence the way I question and things like that. It's a guy named Simon Sinek. I reference him a lot whenever I'm speaking, or you on this call, those of you that are tuning in this webinar, you may have heard of him too. I love his so much of the content of his newest book is really around thinking that defining work or life, even in terms of winners and losers, maybe isn't necessarily the best terminology, right? Which I think is really fascinating. But one of the things that I have been inspired by most during this pandemic is his invitation to those of us who, whether that's, you know, an organization, a corporation, whatever it is to think through reimagining, pivoting, disrupting your business. We've all experienced this disruption. I mean, that's what you're talking about, Will, right? I mean, ending the year going, yay, patting ourselves on the back. Can't wait till the report comes out next, you know, middle of next year when I can put the press release out there and celebrate and do all that. And then 2020 comes and now we're all scrambling and, you know, really having to ask hard questions that we probably have been so comfortable with success that we've not had to before, you know, things. And that's what you're talking about. I mean, when I hear what you're talking about, you know, obviously having been in this industry for a while now, there's tons of research that we do about, well, what's our visitor profile, right? And who are the visitors coming to our destination and what do they look like, right? And what do they spend and you know, generating all this kind of stuff. But the interesting thing that I have seen is very rarely have I heard or experienced teams actually going, okay, is that who we want? Right?
No, you're exactly right.
Is that who we want? Is that who we need? Instead, it's been like, okay, this is just who they are, right? This is the makeup of our visitor profile. But if you think about it in terms, Will, like if you're going to say, because we're starting from scratch, so let's say just fictitiously for the sake of argument for this webinar and this call, we're going to just say, let's design a company. Let's design a travel organization for a fictitious you know, destination. Now we're going to say, who's our ideal visitor, right? Who's our ideal traveler that we want, right? I mean, every business does this. Every business thinks about buyer profiles. You know, when you're thinking about who do we go after, who's our ideal buyer, who's our ideal customer, on and on and on and on, right? So that they can tailor and shape their messaging, build programs to, work on development for. I love Peter's comment. Anyone with a credit card is not an ideal visitor. but that's oftentimes what we do, right? That's how we think about it. So this is some of the work I think that the destinations that are positioning themselves, to your point, to rebound or recover well in 2021 and beyond are doing that kind of work right now internally. They're asking themselves really hard questions, and they're not just saying, okay, this is who we've been getting, but now we're actually going, who is it that we actually need to help us reach the goals that we've heard, not just that we want to set for ourselves, but our community is telling us that they want to, right?
Right, and if you think about the real challenge that we all have now too, going into 2021, is that everything we were doing was really incremental, right? You're doing little pieces because you know the market was growing, so you could do some incremental things and play around the fringes, and as a result, our organization's really optimized to that end. But today we're all at, the funnels are basically zero, and so what we do now to fill those funnels moving forward is going to have really long-term implications. So if, as an example, I think most destinations, most tourism marketers, the initial reaction is going to be, let's shrink our footprint. Let's focus on the regional drive market, the 2 hour lake. Now, I think that's smart near-term strategy, but I think it could be a very dangerous long-term strategy. So like, as an example, we know in Florida that a visitor from, let's say a visitor from Atlanta is going to spend more than a visitor from, a little drive market, right? So a visitor from Alabama. The visitor from Philly is going to spend more than the visitor from Atlanta. The visitor from Chicago is going to spend more than the visitor from Philly. The visitor from New York is going to spend more than the visitors from Chicago. The visitor from Canada is going to spend more than the visitor from New York. The visitor from London is going to spend more than the visitor from Canada. The visitor from Brazil is spending more than the European visitors, and the Canadian or the Chinese are spending triple what the Brazilians are. So you have a good sense for the relative value of each destination, of each source market. And my gut says, and historically tourism marketers in times of challenge are going to shrink up and have a smaller footprint. So really good short-term strategy, but could be a very dangerous long-term strategy. And the great quote about anybody with a credit card is not an ideal visitor, but to me, targeting, rather than just shrinking my footprint as a destination, how about just targeting any Amex Platinum card holder? They're probably more likely to travel. Doing an Amex campaign is going to bring in higher yield visitors than just a regional traffic. So, I think really playing through how you can identify and target the kind of visitors that you want that are going to fit your community, support the businesses in your community, and not just people that are taking advantage of the destination.
I don't know how, and we've done this for 3 months. Tons of really great thought leaders, conversationalists, certainly, high executors in this industry. And it's certainly a gift to moderate these spaces for us and engage. And as we move forward, I think looking to get maybe a little bit deeper with those that we invite on and have conversations around. And so, but the challenge, right, I think is, it's not a simple one, right? This isn't just about thinking, okay, if we're going to recover, if our destination, then we need to start doing, 1, 2, 3, right? It's something that, and what's great, what you mentioned for Florida, right? Okay, that's great for Florida, but if I'm, Tempe, Arizona, or if I'm, Stockton, California, right? Wes, good buddy out there, right? I mean, it's certainly one where I think we need to leverage what we can from these great destinations that we can learn from, but being able to tailor things to, the different, on the ground policy initiatives that are in place that many times that we're seeing are still keeping us from being as nimble or as agile as we need to be. So I love that you bring up both the short term and long term, because I agree with you. I think, in the short term, at least this is what I've learned from my mentors, those that are much further down the road than me, that's how I refer to them. You know what I mean? Those who, much like yourself, Will, those that have, experienced
the gray beards.
Yes. The ones, my elders, right? Frankly, but it's those that I need to, and I would say most of us on this call, should continue to kind of take the lowest seat at the table and learn from. But, you do learn from them that there are short-term responses to short-term challenges and long-term responses to long-term challenges. There's a little difference. And so I'm glad that you bring that up, because I do think, for destinations continuing to try to capitalize on the remainder of summer, probably does look like there's, some short-term initiatives, right? And even going into the fall is when we get past, August, okay, now we're going to be in a new short-term thing. And what do we do? How do we handle that? But thinking long-term, 2021, 22, how do we recover? How do we deal with, what the numbers, we just saw, I'm sure today, I'm sure you saw this too, the layoffs coming, from United Airlines, right? And if the impact that's going to have, trickle down into our destinations all of this, it's so nuanced. It's not just a cookie cutter thing where we can say, oh, great, we just need to increase our website traffic. And if we just run this media here, we can see, like it's not that kind of a thing. It's something where, as leaders of our destinations at whatever level we find ourselves in, positioning ourselves both internally, meaning inside our organization, internally with our stakeholders in our communities, and then collectively trying to come up with a plan, which many times we're seeing, at least Streetsense is seeing this in New York and other places. It means that we need to shift some of our policy. there are some things that have really harbored our ability to grow or attract the right kind of visitor, because it's limited the way that we could collect funds, or it's limited the ability to spend funds, or it's really put us in a position to where we can't organize ourselves in a way in which to drive the results that we want, right? That's a really going to be a really key piece as we think moving long term into 21.
Right, and if you think just even after the 2008 recession, I mean, it took several years to get back on track, right? I mean, that was a serious ding, and this is certainly a much bigger impact than the 2008 recessions, and it's hitting on so many multiple levels. So it's going to take us time to get out of here. So I guess the real fundamental question that you bring up, and I was talking to Jack Johnson from Destination International Foundation yesterday about the kind of push for community, really getting engaged with the community, is a very different conversation, in terms of justifying tourism spending. And now I think is probably a better time than ever to really establish the DMOs and the tourism industry as critical components, and also thought leaders in community development, and really bringing communities together through travel and tourism industry. So again, if we kind of start from there and identify long-term what we want our industry to be, we have a unique opportunity to not just kind of keep playing on the fringes and just kind of doing incremental little things. We're starting at zero. And so there's a really fresh opportunity and a unique opportunity for every destination in the country to identify, again, what success looks like to them, and really develop a long-term plan to facilitate and to, go that direction.
The defining of success, that's hard work. That's really hard work for a destination to do. And you think about it, having served on the destination side myself, I think about going, gosh, that's a difficult conversation even to have, because there's so much pressure. There's political pressure, there's internal pressure, and then you've got as a leader, somebody thinking about all right, well, success for this team member, or this piece of our organization is going to look different than what maybe our hoteliers are telling us, or what city council is telling us, or the alderman, what our BOMA board is telling us, right, or whatever. So and I think what we've heard over the last few weeks is part of success is in learning how to be better facilitators of that conversation, right? And growing our ability to even facilitate that conversation.
Well, and it's identifying the right questions to ask. So I've always thought that in order to be successful from a tourism marketing perspective, you need to have really visionary public sector leadership. So getting alignment with your public sector, that, most often the funds are either coming through there. I mean, you've got that political pressure, and, the top jobs at most DMOs are, political management, managing that. But so you establish a visionary public sector leadership. Then part two is you have to have a really active, engaged, bought in private sector leadership, so that everybody understands where we're going, visionary public sector, and then a bought in, active, engaged private sector. You get that, you're well ahead of the curve in terms of being successful. And obviously you've got your tourism product, and I think DMOs and communities are starting to focus more on that, making sure that you have the product that you want. Oftentimes in the budget battles of past for DMOs, we'd fight to keep money into the DMO, tourism marketing budget, at the expense of maybe, money going to the arts, or money going to parks, or money going to other things out of the tax collections. I think now you start to look at that and say, boy, how do I embrace that? Because that's just helping build the tourism product and the product for the community. One of the guys that I think best example that I've seen was Steve Hayes, who is now the CEO of Visit St. Pete Clearwater, but was prior Pensacola. And he started saying, I'm going to every opening of every, new baseball field, or every, museum. And I'm saying, tourism built this for you, because that's where the money came from, and really embraced the product side. The next piece that, again, I think DMOs have a real opportunity to is to really embrace the industry that's serving visitors and being a massive advocate for the industry, because none of this happens without the frontline workers. And so if you have public sector, really visionary public sector leadership, active engaged private sector, you're supporting the product and you're supporting the industry, the frontline workers, then you have a recipe for success.
So I love that. I think visionary public sector leadership, private sector leadership, right? Those are key. Next, I kind of want to ask you, or kind of push in a little bit and say, if there's somebody on the call or somebody on this webinar and they're from a destination, they're kind of, gosh, we don't feel like we have that, right? We don't feel like we have, or maybe we're not set up to have that. Maybe we've got one or the other, right? Or maybe our, on the ground, the public sector really comes from the from the DMO, CVB, but maybe the private sector is being leaned on by the, Chamber of Commerce or, economic development or something like that, right? What have you seen, what are some steps that the DMO could take, or that some of these leaders on the call here today can take to maybe walk toward that? What would you think?
Well, tough times, challenging times like this is the time to build partnerships that are going to move forward, right? And I think that the biggest suggestion I have is to make sure that we're building partnerships that are going to be strong enough to handle the good times, right? Mm-hmm. Good times, people get territorial, want to keep focused on their thing. Right now, everybody's in the same boat, and so it's a great opportunity, but it has to be a win-win for the community. Getting public sector leadership, again, there's battles, and you can look at community after community where the question is this government money, and then the industry says no, this is hotel money, and where it all coming from. At the end of the day, nobody today in the second quarter of 2020 doesn't recognize how critical tourism is to their community livelihood. I mean, this is in all accounts a travel-led recession. The country's in a recession and the travel industry's in a depression, right? You mentioned the 36,000 jobs at United furloughing in October, so it's not going to get better right away. And again, if we can use this time to build partnerships and to understand that, listen, this isn't about, me fighting for funding. This is about, for the organization, this is about what's in the best interest of building a healthy community.
Yes.
Then we're going to be successful.
Yeah. So what I heard you just say is that leadership or some of that markers of success is being able to reframe the narrative that builds a coalition, right? It's being able to reframe the narrative in such a way that the things that we would maybe traditionally argue on, again, and not that those things aren't important, and not that there is, great debate to be had locally with, okay, do we want these funds, or do we want to build this sport park, or do we want to do this, right? Or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like those are all, the great debate there is needed, right? But at the same time, if what you're saying and what I'm hearing you say is, as a community, we're all here in this together, right? So we're all starting from scratch, meaning not only is travel funnel empty, but right, so is probably the economic development's relocation funnel, right? That's probably empty now too, right? So there's more in common that we have than maybe what we've previously thought through. And so to be taking in all of these institutions, these organizations, these groups, building partnerships with them. We've heard this over and over the last 3 months, right? That's been a really key one. So I'm glad that you're mentioning that. I think the other piece that I would just add to that though is when we think about the motivating factors, right? And Lori Jo asked this question to us, and this is something I'm always thinking about in my head too, but what are the motivating factors that are actually going to draw someone to us versus another, destination in the comp set, right? And then if you're starting from scratch, because again, this is what you're talking about with, gaining share, starting from scratch? How do we actually build a foundation or build upon a foundation that we have built, right? If you've got a great destination, you mentioned St. Pete, Puerto Rico is another one. Others, right? Certainly New York, Chicago, Philadelphia. I mean, so many major markets which have built great foundations of the caliber and quality of this is who they are, right? And this is who we are. So when you come and visit, you're going to have this kind of experience. And so if you're the, again, ideal visitor, you fit into that ideal visitor profile. It makes your decision a little bit easier because you know what you're going to expect. Beyond shopping, dining, like, okay, I can shop anywhere, I can get food anywhere, I can go and, whatever. So, being able to work through, it's like, it's kind of digging a little deeper into the soil of the destination and go, gosh, okay, yeah, we do have all these things, right? And all these things are great suppliers, but they may not be the driver. And do we even have the driver, or are we just aggregating a bunch of suppliers? What is going to be that motivating factor for this, short-term travel and next into the fall as you think about it?
Okay, so I two answers. One, what is the typical tourism marketing message, right? It's art, culture, shopping, dining, fun for the whole family.
Yep.
And in an economic crisis, we can throw in and we've got a great deal for you, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
that kind of covers everybody in the destination. It's a good message, and it's the same message for every destination everywhere all the time.
Yep.
It's the old joke of back running an ad agency doing the tourism for Colorado tourism. And we actually did the experiment. And I'm sure many other agencies have done this in their pitches where they pull out every competing destination that, in their competitive set, put up their ads, cover their logo, and you can't tell who's who, right?
Yeah.
So that's the downside, but it leads to, that's talking about the product. I think that the message is going to be about the person, the people we're talking to is going to become so much more important because you traveled, you came back from a beach with your family and that was, a lake, right?
Yeah.
I took my family out on a canoe, and kayaks last weekend, an hour away. But that was about connection. That was about getting out and being together and doing something new. There's, I can think of every destination I've ever been in with my wife, and she'd buy something on that trip that she would never buy at home, right? But it's a part of the experience and the shopping and being, doing things, exploring new places, new downtowns, new restaurants, and those I went to Floribama Lounge, and I'll never forget the sign on the wall that said, salads because no great story, beer because no great story ever started with a salad, right? And laughing about that experience, and hell, the next, later that afternoon, we ended up buying a puppy, just crazy, but that's a travel experience that just frees people. So I think it's going to be incumbent from a marketing perspective on really understanding the consumer in a more one-on-one way. And then, providing the really, really cool experiences. We were just talking a little bit about the public, private, how to get everybody aligned. And, the CEO's job is to get the private sector and the public sector and the politicians and the chambers and kind of fight that alignment battle. But I think, all the way through the organizations, the marketing team, the social media team can do the same thing with the industry partners, right? At different levels, all the way through, and be the connecting point that allows the bartender at the local brew pub to be, hanging art from the gallery that's, a few blocks away or even in a different part of town, but cross promotion, getting people working together and kind of building those teams. And, again, everybody's got a little bit of time on their hands right now. And that's a great opportunity to kind of foster those experiences and create the real stories that are going to sell destinations.
So I mean, I'm a, I got many books back here. I'm a huge fan of the written word, great communicators. We're dropping a lot of P's in here, right? And so public, private, place, promotion, right? I mean, if any smart marketer knows the 4 P's of marketing, right? But I would say, when we think about destination marketing, and at least to Lori's question that she tosses us here about motivators, there's the 5th P that we've been seeing, at least in future generations, that are impacting travel, and that's purpose, right? That's understanding purpose-based travel, right? And then when we think about what motivates us to pick things over others, it still comes back to emotional connectors versus logical connectors. So just because you got a deal right now, like you're saying, oh, now we're going to add, and we've got a deal for you. Well, we've all got a deal for you now, right? So there's no differentiator there even more, right? I mean, sure, there may be some scale to, level of service, right, with inside of a destination, but the idea as the things that are attracting, future generations in travel are things like, why do you exist, right? As a destination, why do you exist? What do you exist for? Right? What kind of purpose do you have for serving your local community or your neighbors? Or how well do you stand up for the disenfranchised, right? Things like this become huge emotional connectors to attract, audiences, and that's something that, as you talk about thinking both through short-term and long-term, it's something to think about going, okay, what are, maybe there is, some tweaking of targeting and things like this, very tactical things we can do in the short term. But as we think, long term and, planning for 21 and beyond, we building partnership. Are there some partnerships that we put together that are specifically looking after creating more purposeful based travel experiences, right? Or more purposeful, intended, types of maybe around volunteerism, right? Or around, community development or things like this. So that you both, gets into the product side too, but purpose is one that I feel like most destinations they're trying to scratch at it. I think a little bit when we're seeing this message around, family and remembering what matters most, and, the connection that you even just hinted at. I mean, certainly travel experiences are the ones, I know, like, at least when I'm teaching or doing this kind of stuff, it's like, one of the things that I will never forget is the last time I traveled with my grandmother, or the last experience I had with, this person, all right? I mean, those experiences cement themselves, and we travel to not only connect with new ones, but to reconnect with those powerful, motivators that we've had in the past, right? And so I tell a story about, why do when I go to a Starbucks, when I go through a driveway, or drive through a Starbucks, one of the beverages I'll get is a flat white. And one of the reasons why I'm so happy that we carry flat whites now is because I remember being in Australia, when I was in the music business, and outside Sydney, sitting in a cafe, getting a flat white for the first time. And it's that moment, it's that connection around, a craft beverage, right? I mean, a coffee beverage, essentially. But then now when I see it at Starbucks, it's something I draw upon, and it makes me think about that connection. There's an emotional side to that absolutely drives behavior, as I just confessed to all of us here. So.
Yeah, it's true. One of my favorite tourism ads that I've ever seen was, I think, South Dakota, when they did the campaign that said 19 summers. And that's how many summers you have before your kid goes away. Wow. How many opportunities you have for a family vacation. And I thought that was the most compelling message of, listen, this matters. And yeah, you can put it off for a year, but then you're only going to have 17 left. I mean, that is the kind of thing. And obviously Disney does it so extraordinarily well of, can't miss out on your daughter's experience with the princesses. But to your point about purpose and connection, there's so many opportunities to really make the travel experience about the guest. And I think as communities start to look at opportunities to really hone in on like you said, doing good for the community, and rallying the industry to do good for the community and be a force for good within the community at multiple levels outside of just hosting events, right?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. You think, you brought up the idea, kind of pitted market share versus volume as being, what we would have maybe even traditionally thought about in some ways as KPIs. And if you remember, several weeks ago, we did talk about, does COVID introduce new KPIs? Does that shift for us as a destination? We heard from Jay at Entrada, with how they're thinking about sentiment. You mentioned Longwoods earlier, what they're doing on the sentiment studies and things like that. So, as we think coming out of this and are already, we heard from Allie at Seattle going, oh, she's already knee deep in planning for 21. You know what I mean? Like, June, this was June going, oh no, ours are already 21, right? Which is really interesting and encouraging to hear all at the same time. But do you think that market share versus volume is still the paradigm for us in moving into 21?
I think market share is the kind of the indication of, how you're doing relative to the rest of the country, right? I don't know that necessarily means that's what success has to look like. Gotcha. Right? Yeah. I mean, I think, again, the community can say, we're going to be really, really happy at, 65% occupancy, but we want to get the right visitors that are going to come and spend money at our restaurants, at our shops, and really it's quality versus quantity. We might have other destinations that say, the most important thing for us is to have a full-time workforce. And so balancing out seasons is the most important thing that we want to accomplish, because that gives us full-time jobs year round. So let's focus on what we can do to grow the off season. So I don't think it's purely about numbers. I think it's about what's best for every destination and clearly identifying that. And that's hard. It's hard not to say just grow as big and fast as you can. Let's get back to normal as fast as we can and go for it. That may be right for some destinations, but other destinations may say, hey, listen, success for us is a good year-round economy that's supporting all these restaurants, attractions, and shops that give our local residents a quality of life that they don't, that they clearly know right now that they miss because they're not able to go out to their zoos or go to their brew pubs or go to their favorite restaurants because they're closed. And, that's what our success is like. And
I think the other thing was we were kind of thinking through this hour a little bit. We've got, several minutes left. So those of you that are tuning in, feel free to drop your questions in if anything's come up or, any thoughts, at least as you're thinking through that we would love to hear too, just going to, plus the whole entire conversation. So, but there are, I would dare say there's not any destination leader or marketer that either that's on the call or that we would say, that's in the States now, that's not needing to do some sort of assessment work coming out of this to go, well, we thought we had, we thought we understood what our product was, but now that we look at our community, oh my goodness, the product has totally changed because this is no longer here, or this, right? All of these things that we maybe even took for granted that they would be here. So beginning with some kind of, if we're going to be thinking long-term, you got to start with, you got to put up where you are here. Like you go to the mall and you see the map and you go, oh, you are here. Well, without that, you are here, we are kind of guessing a little bit. So it does seem like, some necessary work to be done here is some proper assessments. What, if we're going to figure out who our ideal visitor profile is, if we're going to understand, let that inform who we got to really have an understanding of what does that look like? What is that occupancy rate? Where do we break even? Where do we say success? All of that is possible through an assessment, but it would seem to me like that's got to happen if you're going to think about 21 and coming out of 21 strong.
I think so. I think so too. On multiple levels, from the community, the community sentiment. I think that what Longwoods is doing, it couldn't have come out at a better time. Understanding the sentiment, understanding what the goal from the community looks like, and that again can be different from every destination. I'll never forget my marketing chairman, when I was vice president of marketing at the Denver Convention Bureau, owned a brew pub. And he said, you know what? Only 6% of my visitors are from out of state. But that's the difference between me making money and me losing money. And he was a great champion of travel as a result. Ends up, he became the mayor of Denver, and then the governor of Colorado twice, John Hickenlooper. So, I mean, obviously a smart guy, but I think, you know, again, success and tourism volume and everything is just, it's making sure that we understand that and communicate it. And again, in a time when everybody understands that travel is integral to the local economies at some varying level or another, it's a great time to kind of reinforce that message and understand, kind of, again, get everybody aligned on where you want to go and set up. I firmly believe if you know where you want to go, you'll figure out a way to get there. But yeah, you know, if you don't have that light that you're, you know, we can tick and tack, but if we know where we're going, we'll be able to, you know, weather the storms. If we don't have that firmly planted in the ground of what our success looks like, we're going to react to too many influences and maybe make short-term decisions that are good for now, but aren't getting you anywhere near where you want to be long-term.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. That's a great story too. I love that 6% difference between success. I mean, I think that's really powerful. It's a great story. So Patrick asked this question for us. Do you think a form of travel credit stimulus is going to happen? If it does, how best can destinations prepare to promote themselves to make the most of that opportunity? I love that. I certainly have my own thoughts about it and have been following it closely. But Will, what are you hearing and seeing on the ground, and what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the U.S. Travel Association has done a really good job of highlighting the fact that this is a travel industry-led depression, recession. And just judging by what you're reading in coming out of Washington, clearly the hospitality industry is recognized as an industry that's in need of probably more help than most right now. Yeah. So I'm relatively optimistic that by August 3rd, when they are planned to adjourn, that they're going to come out with the next form of stimulus. And I think encouraging travel is going to be part of it. Then the answer to Patrick's question is how best to do that. And again, how to do that responsibly. We heard from Andrew Wilson in our eTourism Summit Advisory Board call the other day saying, is it even appropriate to be marketing right now? Is it ethical to be trying to bring people into my destination? I heard that from Visit Florida this week as well. So, it's tread carefully at this point in the game.
Yeah, I think, one thing too, to make sure is, from what we're seeing already, is that decision can't be made inside of a bubble, right? That cannot be a siloed decision, because that would be an example, like you just articulated, of a short-term decision that does not move us forward toward our long-term goals at all, right? So, for a destination to steward that decision well, with local leaders certainly informed by science and the intelligence necessary, I think that's just a healthy mitigation strategy too, though, right? I mean, I think for you not to be seen in that type of a side of the argument, like you talk about, that's unethical, right? The unethical side of it or something like that. I do think that that's going to be a key piece of that, and we'll see. And I think we've seen that, though. We've seen destinations banding together through the way that they are creating their safety initiatives and pledges for, hey, these are the things, like, we want you to know, these are the steps we're taking. This is what we're doing. You can see it. This is everyone that's involved. So all of that, I think, is going to continue to be important, so that, and I agree with you. I am optimistic too that something like that will pass. I'm optimistic, certainly from the conversations I've been having, that I think something will happen, and it'll be interesting to see the specifics and how it's funded and whatnot, and where, obviously all of the details, but there's no doubt about it. I think that we have seen, even in over the last couple of holidays, there's enough pent up demand. People are wanting to get out. They're wanting to, reconnect with their families. the things that matter most to them. They're wanting to experience those kinds of things, even if it's, just a short drive away, as it was and has been in my case. So really good question, Patrick.
And think of another thing about that too, just to your point of the talk of this summer of the road trip of the summer of 2020, right? That's the big high demand vacation. We've talked about this in some conversations, and I've heard you in some of the panels earlier, but what a great opportunity for regional partnership. It's not all about me. How do we partner with our other destinations around us to create that great road trip of 2020?
I know there's great products. I think when we think about cultural tourism, I mean, the one that comes to my head immediately, I know that in the South, at least here in the South, is fantastic, is the Americana Music Triangle, right? If you're a music lover and you're looking for a road trip, the Americana Music Triangle is like the pinnacle of destination experience that up and down the trace, Natchez Trace there, you're hitting destinations like New Orleans, Lafayette, Memphis, certainly, Tupelo, Mississippi, Clarksdale, Mississippi, on and on and on. And all through that, you are experiencing rich culture that have created, music. So I know that partnership has been something only because I know about it because I've been a part of it, but as a music lover myself, it's one that I've paid attention to. And there are others. I know there are others, to your point, but I think to Patrick, your question, how do destinations prepare to promote themselves and make most of these opportunities? It might mean, that maybe you've been on the fence before with participating in something like that because maybe you've had a thought or you've had leadership or you've had something that has maybe prevented you or maybe put you in a place where you've been more combative or competitive to some of those regional things. But now, gosh, seize the day, right? There's just nothing but opportunity in front of us as we all are starting from scratch. So maybe renew some interest in some of those partnerships, Will, like you're talking about. That's really good. Well, gosh, we just got a couple minutes left. Will, anything else you want to highlight or tease out for us?
No, Josh, I just want to thank you for continuing to do this. I'm looking forward to watching some of these one-on-one conversations as we go through the summer. I'd certainly ask that anybody that's participating today, if there are topics or issues, because I think there's so many that we could talk about today and go, deep dive into opportunities. Just for one, I know my son was supposed to be playing summer collegiate baseball, and they canceled the season, but I'm jealous of all the dads that are out there that get to go watch their kids sports this summer, that are back on the baseball tournaments and softball tournaments and volleyball tournaments. So there's going to be some areas of the market that is going to come back earlier. And I think maybe we can explore some of that in some future conversations, which would be really, really interesting. And then I just want to encourage everybody to take a look at eTourism Summit. One of the community conversations we had is this year we're going to expand with the Community Pass, so DMOs can make all these conversations available broader and deeper into their communities as we're diving deep into the tactics and the solutions for making 2021 a more exciting, successful year than 2020 has been to date.
Yes, and it would not do me well if I did not also mention the travel vertical. Thank you, Lori. Appreciate that for sure. But Ava, thank you too for joining us. Appreciate you so much. And it's been a great time. We'll look forward to continuing to connect with you in future weeks. Again, I'll just reiterate what Will said. Reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, email jcollins@streetsense.com. Happy to help any way I can. And if there are guests or topics that you think would be really incredible, challenging, whether questions, whatever, would love for you to send them to me, and we'll make it happen as we move forward.
Thank you, Josh, so much for your continued leadership in this and keeping the conversation going. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Will. We'll take care. Have a great rest of the week, my friend.
All right. You too, buddy. Welcome back.
Bye.